Okay. So, I'm always, as you guys know, bear with me if you guys have heard this before. This is like my 200 and something sales meeting. So, if ever I repeat myself, I'm sorry. I try to like go back and look at a historical record of everything I talked about, but it gets, sometimes I repeat myself. I guess I'm turning into my father, repeating the same stories over and over again. Anyway, a lot of you guys know I've been training for this event in September, and I'm basically running a lot, hiking a lot. And as I get going, I'm just up in nature and I'm thinking, and it's one of the things I really like about it. So I'm always making these different analogies, these different correlations, right? And so my thought for this Monday morning is ascend to greater heights, right? This is a picture just a couple weeks ago of me and my boys in Alaska, and this is the most summited peak in Alaska. It's just outside of Anchorage. Anchorage is like over here, and it's not like a super hard hike. It's maybe 4.5 miles round trip, but it gets pretty steep towards the top. But it had a really cool view, and you know, over the past 10 years, I've started doing a lot more hikes. And basically the way I got to that was about 10 years ago, I was a little bit tired of just kind of, you know, the average gym stuff. I was thinking about, you know, how can I stay in shape, but like do things that I like. And living here in Utah, you know, we live here in the Wasatch Front, and basically anywhere you look around you, there's mountains everywhere. And about 10 years ago, I was looking up at some of these mountains, and I realized that I'd never been to the top of most of those, that I'd grown up there my whole life as a kid. I'd done scouts, done a lot of hikes, but I'd never even been to the tops of most of the peaks of my own state. And so I decided I want to start going to the tops of some of these things. And what I found was whenever I would go think about doing it, there was basically 3 things that would stop me, right? The first was, I was always like, oh, well, I don't have any hiking boots or hiking shoes or whatever. The second was, well, I don't know, you know, I don't have one of those backpack thingies with a straw in it. And, you know, I don't want to run out of water, making excuses, you know. And the third was, I don't have anybody to go with, right? And so those 3 things were pretty easy. So I decided to kind of identify, you know, one, I want to do this, right? So what do I need to do? The first was I had to get off the metaphorical couch, so to say. I had to actually go want to do these things, and then very easily start eliminating some of my excuses, right? Some of the things that I always used to tell myself, well, I would go do that, but I don't have any of those, you know, fancy hiking shoes. I don't want to go up in my Nikes or whatever, and I don't want to run out of water. And so I went to the store one day and I bought some hiking shoes, and I bought one of those Camelback bags, you know, with the straw out of it. And I'd like to say that I immediately started hiking. I didn't, right? Like I sat in my garage or whatever for a while until the mood, you know, one day I'm like, I don't have any excuses. I just started hiking. The other thing that I found was I needed someone to go with, right? It's a lot easier to start getting something when you have a tribe or a support system or somebody to enjoy that journey with along the way. And so I started reaching out to friends, other people that wanted to hike with me, that had similar goals, and it made it a lot easier. So when I decided that I had this as a goal, I, 1, had to get off the metaphorical couch, 2, had to eliminate all of the easy barriers to entry, right? Because a lot of times we make excuses to prevent ourselves from doing the actions that we need to. And there's a concept, I can't remember, I always think of it as baby steps from the movie What About Bob? You know, where I'm dating myself if anybody has not seen the movie What About Bob? But he basically has a therapist that breaks it down into baby steps for him, right? And one of the things, a tactic, if you're having a hard time getting yourself to do something, is breaking it down into small, simple steps, or, you know, just taking the action that precedes the action, right? Say, for example, you want to go to the gym. Well, if you go get dressed in your gym clothes, it's a lot easier to get out the door and go to the gym when you're already dressed in that, right? So eliminate the easier barriers to entry of whatever it is you're trying to do. Get the right gear. You know, make sure you eliminate all your excuses. These are all analogies, guys, right? Like whatever it is that you need to be doing to get the right gear, and then find a tribe. or a support system of people who will go out and do these things with you. So these are what I really wanted to talk about is as you start doing these things, these metaphorical mountains or trails in life, I've noticed a couple of things, right? And there's a reason why a lot of people use summiting mountains or ascending to peaks as some sort of, motivational analogy. And that's because there's a very direct correlation, right, of this process and achieving some sort of success or elevation in life. And so a couple of things that I noticed is whenever you want to go on a hike and go to the top of any mountain, whether that be, a little local hill randomly where you live or Mount Everest, there's going to be some sort of degree of difficulty that increases. And along that way, along that path, less and less people are going to progress along that. And it's the same thing with life. It's the same thing with success, right? So let's say I'm going to go ascend this peak, right? Usually to get there, you got to drive on a road. It's probably a freeway. It's generally paved, smooth. Everybody can drive on it. You start heading that direction. And then some point along there, you transition to generally a narrower paved road. You start going up the canyon, you start going up the mountain, the road gets a little bit smaller. And then a lot of times, that'll kind of shift into a bumpy road, into a dirt road. And here's where it starts weeding some people out, right? The first sign of any sort of difficulty, the first sort of transition, maybe their car can't make it, maybe, they don't want to drive on a dirt road, they're not equipped to deal with the bumps. Then you'll usually arrive at the trailhead, right? And the trailhead's generally some sort of parking lot, paved or unpaved, and then you can start the trail. And when you start at the trailhead, one of the things, and I went on a hike this weekend to Horsetail Falls here in Alpine, and the path to start is very wide. It's very well worn. There's a lot of people that go up there. It's a great hike for a quick little, couple hour hike. People take their dogs, people take their horses. There's a lot of people. That path is really, really well worn. Well, as you get going, it starts going up, starts getting steeper. Generally, the trail is not quite so worn. You start seeing more rocks. A lot of people start questioning their life choices, start questioning their preparedness, start wondering if they brought the right shoes, the right gear, the right people, the right mindset, right? And this continues as you go on along the path. Usually, you get here to number 6, it starts getting steeper and steeper as you start getting towards, generally these goals or objectives, whatever they may be along the path. It's maybe the top of a mountain, a waterfall, some overlook, some viewpoint. And you start seeing the path starts getting a little bit more narrow and less traveled, right? This could be some sort of, I feel like I'm giving like a church analogy or something like that, but it's the same thing with life, right? All of a sudden, you start getting a little bit higher and you start having technical sections. And what that means is basically bigger rocks, more narrower path. Maybe there's a steep side on each side. And as these trails get more difficult, as you get closer to these payoffs, people start turning back. Maybe they're not physically able. Maybe they were not mentally prepared. Maybe they don't, like I said, they don't have the right gear. Or maybe it just was never their objective in the first place was to go that far, right? They never thought they could or they never wanted to. Then as you start, getting along, the path really starts to get more narrow, less and less markers. And as I've ascended a lot of these mountain peaks, what happens is you generally get to a point that they call it the scramble, right? Does anybody know what the scramble is? It basically means there's no clear path anymore, right? You can see your objective, you know where you want to go, and you're essentially rock climbing to some sort of degree. And they rate these different types of scrambles on a rating scale, whether you have to use your hands and feet, or sometimes, with some of these mountains, the more technical you get, you have to have climbing gear, right? You have to have spikes and shoes and ropes and things like that to get higher and higher and higher. And again, with each one of these degrees of difficulty, as you get closer to these summits, the higher the peak, the more difficult it is, the less and less people go there, right? A lot of times people get scared. It's dangerous up there, frankly. You know, a lot of times it's exposed, meaning there's drop-offs, there's cliffs, there's rocks that can fall, there's, you know, sometimes snow, sometimes glaciers. And again, more and more people turn back. And then generally there's one final push to the summit, right? A lot of times you're climbing on your hands and knees. You know, I've made plenty of videos on these final summit pushes where I'm like making a video to my wife, you know, saying like, oh, hey, hopefully you never see this video, but just in case I decided to do something stupid, you know, there's generally one last little piece of danger or one last little piece of difficulty before you finally make it to that big payoff, right? And so guys, what I'm saying is there is a direct correlation with summiting mountains and success in life. So many of us, one, never even have that goal to begin with, never even have those objectives. We never set them, we never think about them, we never even have those things in mind. Two, we're generally never prepared for those, right? We don't take the necessary steps that we need to go further. And then a lot of people just don't put in the time, effort necessary to ever get that, right? And I want to tell you guys a personal story. I've told this to some of you guys before, but this picture right here is the top of Mount Olympus here. And when I started hiking all these trails and doing all this, one time my dad told me a story. He said, yeah, my grandpa Bill, his father, passed away in his early 50s. And he was like, you know, I'm glad to see you summiting all these mountains and doing all this. He said, you know, your grandpa had this goal, this bucket list goal in his life to summit Mount Olympus because that was the big prominent mountain in the valley in which he lived. And he carried this note, this yellow piece of paper in his wallet his whole life, and he never did it. And he gave it to me on his deathbed and said, you know, I never did this, hopefully you do. And my dad is no longer physically able to do that. And he told me this story a couple of years ago, and I was kind of frustrated. I was like, how stupid. You and my grandfather have carried this freaking note around in your wallet as like this bucket list thing to do, and it wasn't really that catastrophically difficult. Yeah, it took a little bit of physical training and a little bit of preparation, but you just both never did it. So I did that within 2 weeks of my dad telling me the story, and up at the top there's a mailbox there where you can write a letter. And so I wrote a letter to my dad and grandpa, said, hey, I did it, I crossed it off the bucket list, you know, and it was a great experience for me. These are some of the other, just, you know, I have literally hundreds, thousands of these pictures of doing this over the past 10, 15 years. Sean, Riley, Rich post here. This is us at the top of Half Dome. And, you know, to the point that I was making prior, once you get, I thought I was going to kill this guy right here, Rich post. This was a week after my Ironman, and I was in pretty good shape, and I thought I was going at a slow pace, and poor Rich was almost, he almost passed away. So this was the final push to the summit. Like I was telling you guys, sometimes it gets increasingly difficult, or the final push gets really hard. Here at Half Dome, I think you can tell how steep this is. This is Riley. I think this is actually a video. Wonder if it'll play. It just gives you a little bit of an idea. Oh, nope. Of how steep that is. Where we were literally holding on to these wires and cables making that final push, you know. And at the end, of course, there was this huge giant payoff. You get to overlook this 4,000 foot drop off, and you know, it was a great experience. The Haiku Stairs in Hawaii, Nepali Coast in Hawaii, and I only, you know, share these things to illustrate with you. I'm not trying to encourage everybody to just go on a hike or something like that, even though I think you would all love it. It's a love spending time in nature and achieving those things, right? And there's something that people call peak bagging, right? What you'll find is a lot of people, once they've ascended to these summits, they don't just stop, right? They're not like, well, I made it to the top of this mountain. I'm never going to do anything like that ever again. Usually it's, well, what's next, right? Okay, I did this. I did this hike. I achieved this. I'm going to do another thing. And that's how successful people are too, guys, is you will never arrive to a point where you're like, okay, I'm done, I'm gonna rest, I'm gonna stop, I'm gonna sit on the top here, I've achieved enough, I'm not gonna do anything else. That's not how it is. So I encourage all of you, to think about whatever it is that, metaphorically in your life you have as a goal. Where are you at in that process, right? Are you at the very beginning? Are you at the point where everybody turns back? What is it you're trying to accomplish, and where are you at along that process? So that's what I got for you guys. Hopefully that felt a little bit more like a sermon than I expected, but hopefully it was valuable to y'all. So trainings and updates. So last week, Dan and I spent a few days at the WellCare rollout. We had convinced them to do it here in Salt Lake City. Well, I don't know if we convinced them, but I like to think that we did. It was nice to not have to travel to another state, to have their whole company come here. We stayed at the Grand America and did a little event up in Park City. Really good, really cool to spend some time with them and their leadership. And I just kind of wanted to recap what we're hearing from that rollout and some of the others. Josh with Senior Market Advisors was at the Aetna rollout at the same time. And the general consensus seems to be this year's going to be, like Dan and I have been saying for years, pretty close to how last year was, right? Some of these carriers are a little bit further along in course correcting. It seems like Aetna and Humana that took their lumps last year really are going to maybe take a little more lumps this year, but they're going to be a little bit further along that course correction than some of the other carriers, maybe like United. WellCare is kind of a stay the course type thing. They're not really expected to grow a ton, but they're expecting to, kind of hold the line. And the key phrase is all of these carriers are saying work towards profitability, right? They want to get back towards profitability. And I think that's really good. It's crazy that all these massive insurance carriers, these multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar carriers, their main goal with these ACA and Medicare Advantage products and Medicare in general is to get back to the days where they could be profitable, right? So there's a lot of things that go into that equation and into that. And so they're going to continue to make some changes. A couple of the interesting things that I heard from the WellCare rollout is they're shifting. You're going to hear this word a lot more, AIPs. Those are applicable integrated plans. And if you guys have heard about some of these carriers that have the state contracts where they're either, most of the time they're going to be HIDEs, highly integrated dual eligibles, or FIDEs, fully integrated dual levels. And these are different levels of coordination of care between Medicaid and Medicare. And a lot of times it's going to be these companies like WellCare, Centene, or Molina that are spearheading those. They have those state contracts, the majority of those, and they're going to be managing these AIPs, these applicable integrated plans. And that's really going to be an increased push over the next 5 years to where, remember, by 2030, they want to have all these dual plans with the states aligned or integrated. And so it's a pretty aggressive push. What does that mean after 5 years for us and selling duals? I don't know. But right now, that is the continued push, is more integration there. And you would think that a lot of these carriers that have been doing these dual plans would be further along in coordinating this care and doing this than they are, but there's actually still a lot of work that needs to be done there. So right now, I believe WellCare Centene is going to have 11 of these AIPs, 11 of these integrated plans, and 10 out of 11 of them, all but Hawaii, I'll post these, all these states are in their first looks, guys, if you look at it, but they're all going to have these integrated aligned plans. And one of the things that we've been struggling with this year is making sure the Medicaid network matches, right? Some states we're having to change that network to match so they can be aligned. That's a pain in the butt. I don't really think that's a winning strategy to have to focus on trying to do that going forward. With WellCare and Centene in these 10 states, the Medicaid is already the lead plan sponsor there. So they don't have to they don't have to change that network on the back end in most of these states. So that's a big value, big win with them. A couple other things that I took notes. They're lowering their H contracts. That's one of the things that Dan and I have complained about over the past few years is why do so many of these insurance carriers have so many of these H contracts out there? These different plan filings, and they've got 3 different types of D-SNPs in the same market. It's just really convoluted and complicated. And you spread that out across the country, it just really creates a ton of plans, right? So they're going to be phasing out some of these plans, crosswalking them, transitioning them over to a slimmer, lower portfolio of H plans. I think that's a good thing for the industry, and it sounds like most of the carriers are going to start doing that as well. We've heard Dan was out at Humana's partner council, and basically the message from Humana was things are going to look pretty good. That last year about 3% of their total market share saw increased benefits, and they're saying 80% this year is going to see slightly better benefits this year than last. They do have one area in Florida where they're going to SAR some of their plans. Those all, hopefully no beneficiaries watch my sales meetings. Anyway, there's going to be some small disruption there. And then they're wanting to get back to business, right? Back to growth. Aetna, kind of same message. They're actually expanding in 16 different C-SNPs. So you're starting to see this emergence of some of the different carriers with a different strategy. WellCare seems to be doubling down on duals, wanting to do a better job, have better retention, service those people even better. Aetna is expanding, but WellCare is not expanding C-SNPs right now. Aetna is announcing they're expanding C-SNPs into 16 different states. So all these different carriers are starting to kind of, put their heads together and emerge with what they feel like will be their growth strategy over the next couple of years. So overall, it sounds like things may not be quite as rough as they were last year, but there is going to be a little bit of disruption. A lot of that, as we know, is going to come on the United Healthcare side, which, they are the largest provider for Medicare beneficiaries in the country. So a lot of disruption there too. But what you all should be doing this time of year, I can't believe it, but we're almost about to hit August. You should be paying attention to some of these things, identifying parts of your book of business and clients that you're going to need to service. And then as those ANOCs, those annual notices of change, start going out sometime in September, you can start soft reaching out to your clients, kind of getting a plan of action of who you need to service during annual enrollment. And then for all of you, not just our retention team, but all of you field agents, that October 1st through October 15th time when you can essentially pre-sell, you can talk benefits, but you can't enroll somebody, you need to really have it in your mind that that's when you're doing your service work, when you're really identifying and talking to your clients that you're going to need to plan change and take care of those people early and often so you can transition very quickly in annual enrollment into growth mode, right? Into adding new clients to your book of business. If you can do that, you're gonna be set up to have a great annual enrollment. And then that'll kind of carry through OEP like this year, where we basically wrote just as much or more business January through March than we did in annual enrollment. So that's what y'all should be focused on right now. That's kind of some high level, things that we're hearing from the industry. The general tone from a lot of these carriers is, hey, this year's not the year to expand huge. This year's not the year to, really go aggressive again on benefits. This year's, the second year in a row where we're kind of course correcting. And then we're optimistic for plan year 2027. So that's kind of what we're hearing. Again, guys, just a reminder, we've done a lot better job of this, not just, hurrying, spamming through enrollments, throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. Really doing a good quality job. As we've been saying for the past year, the industry is really demanding a more sophisticated, higher caliber of agents. And if you're not that, you're going to be completely weeded out of the industry. One of the interesting things that I'm seeing in our space right now is, I would call them the last days of some of these telesales reps. We're seeing, I would be really shocked if one of these big 3 call centers that y'all know of and the name is still operating and doing business by the end of the year. I'd be really surprised. In fact, I'd really want to shake the hand of whoever continues to raise money for that company and convince investors to keep pouring money in there. It's like an endless black hole money pit. But either way, what I'm seeing is we're trying to hire people for our own, call center or our own W-2 side of things, is we're seeing less of those people out there in the industry right now. We're seeing less people applying. We're seeing a lot of people that have kind of rode the wave of, let's call it the Medicare telesales world, and they're not able to adapt to this new world, right? They're not able to do it in a good way where they're not being good quality agents, and a lot of these companies are folding up. They're calling it a day. They're transitioning into other industries, and we're seeing that with a lot of these low acumen agents. And I'm actually happy about that. I'm very happy about it. It's making hiring, and excuse me, I'm not saying anybody doing telesales is lower acumen. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is there had been from a lot of these other companies and fly-by-night shops dragging low quality, low ethic people into the industry that had kind of, caused a lot of pain for a lot of us over the past few years. And I'm seeing a lot of those people moving on, kind of just frankly moving out of the business. And that I'm happy about that long term. Our effectuation rates have got a lot better. This is one of the things that we're going to continue to see focused on in our industry is Medicare, guys, was never meant to be this thing where you switch your plan every year or multiple times a year. That's asinine. It's insane that our industry evolved to where people would do that. We're seeing the return to the, placing the right person on the right plan and having that person hopefully be on there for multiple years. That's how these people ultimately get good quality of care, have better outcomes, and how the carriers have profitability is when they know what's going on with that life, when they're treating them, when they have the opportunity to deliver these models of care, these MOCs to these people. And that's really what we're seeing the industry focus on, is a return to that. It's great news for us, independent agents. That means better residuals, better retention, higher lifetime values. Same thing for all of us in the industry, is we continue to focus on a return to these good quality plans, helping people get and stay on these plans long term, indefinitely, right? It's been insane to me to watch. I'm trying to remember what WellCare's overall company effectuation rate was, but it was pretty shocking. That it wasn't just us or our agents or anything. It's all these carriers, guys. We've seen even the carriers like United and Humana drop about 20 percentage points of effectuation rate from the 90s and high 80s down into the 60s and low 70s, pretty much across the board. And that's not just year over year. That's plans surviving through rapid disenroll the first 90 days. That's absolutely insane. If you did that back in the day, 7-8 years ago, the carrier would probably, they'd be like, you have 2 rapid disenrolls? Oh, you're termed. It's been interesting how that's kind of evolved to kind of the norm, but it's getting back to a more healthy, better quality of business. Pipeline lead management, just again, one more time to remind you guys as we start getting into annual enrollment, if you don't know how to appropriately track, manage your pipelines, please reach out to your supervisor, your team lead, your agency owner, somebody here at Agent Boost, and let us help you. This is your money, managing your book, managing your clients, managing your leads. Please do so in an effective manner. Just quickly, reminders again, we're coming to that final phase of the year where people, if they're not moving over very quickly, probably not going to be ready for us in time for annual enrollment. And even as it is right now, we're probably going to struggle with releases if their contracts are already encumbered somewhere else. But we have that $500 referral bonus. Again, reminder for our elite agent training coming up. The next one's in Tampa on the 5th and 6th. I think we have a pretty good group. I'm expecting about 40 people. Does that sound about right? So there's a couple of us from Salt Lake heading out there. Should be a good time with some really great training out there. So just kind of excited to spend time with all of you, all the agents out there. And if anybody wants to kind of hustle and get out there, is that next week? Dang, it's going fast. Looks like we're in Tampa next week. So I will not have sales meeting next week because we'll be on a plane. Reminder that the trip is still happening. We still have really great, a lot of you are working hard to qualify for that. And it is going to be at Grand Cayman and or its equivalent, that as soon as Dan and I get 10 freaking minutes to sit down and figure some stuff out, we will announce if there's going to be a change to that. But this is kind of the most recent tracker of who's trending to qualify for that. I'll post that out in Slack because it's a little bit hard to read for some of y'all. And then overall sales month to month, this is pretty crazy. Carolyn at 43. It's a lot for July. That's a great month with a couple more days to go. So really great work. Fernando, there's Israel. Looks like the Slades are on here. They're ACA, somehow pulling over into here. But one of the things that I've noticed, guys, is our strategic sales agents, that team's really crushing it right now. And it's interesting to me, the different ebbs and flows of the teams, of who kind of carry the water, of what type of agents y'all are. And so it's nice that, let's just put it this way, if you're a strategic sales agent and you would be getting prorated commissions, but you're getting paid the same consistent way, right now is when you're feeling pretty good about that decision. So because the prorated commissions definitely start sucking as an independent agent this time of year, right? You're getting your August 1st, your September 1st, you're like, oh cool, $150. This pays for my tank of gas, You got to write a lot of business there. So anyway, that's what I got for you guys this week. We're coming up here to the end of the month. Got a couple days to finish strong. Really appreciate all of y'all. I went a little bit long today. Sorry again for the technical difficulties for y'all on Zoom. Maybe one day we'll have it consistently figured out. Appreciate you guys. Have a great day. Agent Boost.